is an intriguing one because he was an undrafted free agent.
Follow Matt on Twitter and Instagram at Matt Schneidman.
This is good stuff.
Or use the talk and text line at 1-414-799-1973.
If he can carry over what he's done in practice to games, then maybe we could start talking about, okay, Packers might have something here.
Now with Doug Russell, here's Matt Schneidman on the game.
Matt Schneidman Show Wednesday, October 11th. And oh boy, let me tell you, I have never been more glad to step foot back in the fine state of Wisconsin after 6 long, hot days in Las Vegas, Nevada. I obviously went out there to do work, contrary to popular belief. I went to Raiders practice Thursday, Friday, chatted with Devontae Adams, even though he declined my one-on-one request. Still answered my questions more than adequately in his press conference. Asked Daniel Carlson something for that story, and then obviously covered the game on Sunday. I didn't have the typical Vegas experience, but it was still nice to step foot back in Wisconsin. I need at least a little bit of breeze. There is no breeze in Vegas. There's just a stimulation overload with everything going on there. So I was glad to get back. Doug, you did not go out to Vegas. Thank you for holding down the fort.
Of course.
Yesterday, thank you for guiding us through, I believe it was Friday's show when I was in my hotel room with maybe the worst Wi-Fi I've ever seen in my life. Granted, I will take some blame because I was given the option to pay for the premium Wi-Fi or, take the free standard Wi-Fi, and the Athletic was paying for my hotel, so I didn't want to expense Wi-Fi, and we made it work. But I'm glad to be back. Packers lost to the Raiders, as everyone knows. They're on the bye week, so kind of a slow week here. No availability today. No availability until next Monday. Players will be out of town, I'm assuming. The team will be self-scouting. And oh, Nelly, there is a lot to self-scout. And a lot of it is not pretty. And I'm going to read you one stat, Doug, that I discovered yesterday, and I want your reaction to it.
Okay.
In the ranking of offensive points scored per game in the first half, the Packers ranked 29th this season. So only 3 teams have scored fewer points per first half than the Packers. Well, I should say they're tied for 29th. Sorry.
Well, that
Atlanta
makes it
Falcons,
a lot better.
I believe. 5.2 points per first half. Over the last 3 games, they are last in the NFL in points per first half with 6 total, 0, 3, and 3. However, in the second half, offensive points per second half, the Packers rank first in the NFL. More than the second place Miami Dolphins. I believe they have 15.8. The Packers have 16 points per second half. That is more than any other team in the NFL. How can you explain that?
I guess the easy explanation is halftime adjustments, but we both know that that's a load of garbage.
That's not a real thing.
It's not. So I don't know. You can't keep getting off to these slow starts. And, even if you want to go for football vernacular in the head-to-head, the Falcons beat the Packers. So the Packers, I guess, would be 29th by themselves if you want. But it's weird. It's a very weird statistic because it's not. I don't see anything markedly different other than some execution between the first half and the second half. Are you seeing different schemes? Are you seeing different, adjustments that allegedly are being made from one half to the next with this team? Because I don't know that I see that other than, sometimes they're just playing a little bit better. Although Jordan Love had it by far his worst game as a pro on Monday night, but and especially in the second half, just some bad mistakes. We'll just put it that way. I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. It's. I wouldn't have pegged that, but I guess I'm not shocked by it just having watched the team over the first 5 games of the year.
I don't know if there's too many common themes. Something I talked about with the guys on 9 to Noon this morning is if they're behind double digits, I know they weren't behind double digits on Monday night, but if they're in a deficit, they got to let it loose a little bit.
Yeah.
So maybe they're taking more risks.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe teams are playing softer coverage. I'd really have to delve into the specifics, but regardless of what it is, the Packers have to figure out how to start faster. And what's concerning if you're a Packer fan or the Packers themselves is you just had 10 and a half, 11 days to self-scout and figure out why you started slow against the Saints and Lions. And you came out with your piss ice cold against the Raiders, to use a Matt LaFleur term.
It's a good term. I like that.
It is. Now, Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love stepped to the podium inside Allegiant Stadium on Monday night, and talked about, oh, we got to take the bye week to self-scout, figure out what we can do better. And I asked Jordan Love, what gives you the faith that you'll be able to figure out these slow starts over the bye week if you weren't able to over the bye week? You pretty much have 2 bye weeks in a row. I mean, I know it's a mini bye, but you get what I'm saying.
Sure.
If they can't figure this out against what is currently the number 32 scoring defense in the NFL in the Denver Broncos, yes, I know they allowed 70 points a game and that skews it, but they're not good. Not a good defense. It's not like they just allowed 38 or 70 points one game and then none the others.
Yeah, what they give up to the Jets, 34?
They gave up 31 to the
31.
Jets, 28 to the Bears, I believe. It's just not a good team. If the Packers can't get right against them, then I don't know who they can get right against. I think there are a couple things that they can do to rectify some of their issues. Number one is get Aaron Jones back. Biggest field tilter on the Packers team on the offensive side of the ball. What he can do in the running and passing game is second to none on the team. And there's very few running backs across the NFL. Austin Eckler, Christian McCaffrey. Who else that is that much of a threat? Like Josh Jacobs is a really good runner, but he's not as much of a threat in the pass game. Derrick Henry's not a threat in the pass game as much. Aaron Jones is elite in that regard. Alvin Kamara, when he's healthy, when he's rolling. Matt LaFleur pushed back on that. He said he doesn't like that narrative of, oh, Aaron Jones is the quick fix. He doesn't like the narrative of this team is young. He doesn't want to make excuses, but guess what? The fact of the matter is 33 can cover up a lot of problems.
Well, and this team has a lot of problems. And yes, they are young. And yes, they are injured. They're, playing with their second string left tackle. Their right tackle, it still feels like he's a little bit slowed. The offensive line hasn't been very good, honestly, in the last several weeks. And part of that is because of injuries. Part of it's just because they haven't played well. They are missing Aaron Jones. They do have young wide receivers. They do have a quarterback who's really struggling with the deep ball right now. So if you add it all up, I mean, are they excuses or are these reasons? Maybe the truth is somewhere in between, but this is a team that, quite frankly, isn't very good right now. And self-scouting is great, but until they get some guys back, and they know that the left tackle is not coming back, and he may never play another snap in a green and gold uniform ever in his life.
Mm-hmm.
They got to get right. And if they don't get right, it's going to be a season of some misery, and hopefully by the end of the season, some growth. This is kind of, I don't do game by game predictions, but at the beginning of the season, I said I thought this was a 6-win team, maybe adjusted it after a couple of games, but right now, I don't know. I mean, this is a team that is really struggling, and you hope for growth by the end of the season, whether that manifests itself with wins or just growth. At this point, I can't tell you.
I think something that's important to realize, and yes, it's part of our job to react accordingly after every game. And so we're reacting this way after the Raiders game. They played terribly, specifically on offense, and it's kind of been a trend the last 3 games, so we can react with more substance, more validity. But it's also important to realize, as Aaron Rodgers said on the Pat McAfee show this week, the narrative can change starkly from week to week.
Sure.
If Jordan Love comes out and they put up a 35 clip against the Broncos and win 35-20, then all of a sudden it's okay. Maybe this team can take advantage of its weak schedule and backdoor its way into the playoffs. But we have these big picture discussions, as that's our job after every game. And so this week's is Jordan Love the guy? Are they going to be a playoff team? Is this what we should have expected all along? But guess what? 2 weeks from now, we might be having a completely different discussion. That's the fun part, the intriguing, interesting part about covering this league, is because the storylines change every week. Is it irresponsible to run with something like this, knowing it could change? I don't think so, because like I said, we have a couple weeks of evidence to realize that it's not just one game of the Packers offense struggling, it's a couple. But at the same time, we can realize that there's still plenty of room to turn it around if they get right, figure some things out. Another thing that I wanted to get your opinion on, they got to get Jordan Love on the move. That's something Matt LaFleur said on Tuesday. 2 of their most notable plays came on play action rollouts on Monday night. To the left specifically. One of them, fake handoff rollout to the left, Jordan Love ran for 26 yards. One of them, fake handoff rollout to the left, pass to Christian Watson for a 77. Granted, there was a coverage breakdown, but stress the defense horizontally. allow the kid to make plays outside the pocket, manipulate the pocket, allow him to change things up. Don't just have him drop back 5 or 7 steps and let opposing defensive lines tee off. Especially, they're not going to face a Max Crosby or Aiden Hutchinson every week. Those two guys are elite. But don't just let offensive lines tee off and stunt and twist their way, stunt and twist the Packers' offensive line into oblivion. Create. Do some different stuff. We saw it at the beginning of the season. I feel the Packers have maybe gotten away from that a little.
Yeah, I do too. And you're right. I mean, Crosby and Hutchinson, those are elite players, and they're going to get theirs no matter who they go up against. But it's part of the maturation process of Jordan Love. It's part of the maturation process of any quarterback. And, this is a quarterback who now has 6 starts under his belt, and that's still not a lot. And perhaps he's still trying to feel his way through. I do think that Matt LaFleur has to help him a little bit more. I think Matt LaFleur with the play calls, I mean, when it's third and manageable and you're trying to throw a route that is trying to get a big chunk play of 35 plus, I don't know that that's the right call to keep the chains moving, especially in the second half, which is what we saw on Monday. The ball to Christian Watson in the end zone was underthrown. Maybe Christian Watson needs to fight a little bit more for balls like that. I think that's criticism that is fair. But Matt LaFleur has to see what he has in his quarterback and maybe adjust a little bit to that. He's not good on the deep ball right now. And whether or not that can come in practice or that can come in games, or maybe it comes in games that aren't high leverage situations. And Monday night's game, because it was close, was a high leverage situation every time the Packers had the ball in the second half. Maybe he needs to adjust to the situation. So I think that like you said, there's a lot of self-scouting that has to go on. But, on the other side of the ball, I think a lot of Packers fans are scratching their heads about why Preston Smith is trying to cover Devontae Adams too. So there's a lot to pick on Monday night's game. And I think it is fair to look at this 60 minutes of football as a bit of a microcosm of the first 5 games of the season, and saying, all right, what can we as a team do better in the second half? And like you said, try to take advantage of the schedule.
I'm glad you brought up the Preston Smith, Devontae Adams thing, because, listen, I understand what Matt LaFleur is saying, and I asked him about it after the game, and he was asked about it again yesterday. I understand the premise of what he's saying, in that other offensive coordinators, other teams get paid a lot of money to create mismatches. And when I asked LaFleur about it after the game, he said, we did that with Devontae plenty, got him matched up against guys he shouldn't have been matched up against. And they've done it against other teams with Aaron Jones. I mean, look at Aaron Jones' 35-yard touchdown catch on that choice route in week 1 when he was lined up against TJ Edwards, a linebacker for the Bears. Play he injured his hamstring on.
Right.
So it's going to happen. Mismatches are going to happen. With the formations both teams were in, the Raiders were able to go empty and get a mismatch. What you have to do is either find a way to get out of it with a check or call a timeout, because some of those mismatches are impossible to avoid. It's just the way the chess match of the NFL works. Both teams are going to get theirs in a given game. It's not always going to go the Packers' way. But given the stakes of each situation, and I say each situation because you remember when Devondre Campbell lined up on the perimeter against Bijan Robinson, 3rd and 3 in Packers territory, late 4th quarter, Packers up 2. Bijan runs a slant for 10 yards to, I think, like the Packers' 32-yard line. Beats Campbell. He kind of gets picked. Falcons score later that drive and don't give up the lead. On Devontae, 2nd and 10, 21 yards to the Packers' 16 late in the 3rd quarter. They score later that drive, don't give up the lead. So I get what Matt LaFleur is saying when he says, sure, we could call a timeout, but timeouts are valuable. I understand wanting to have all 3 timeouts in the bag for one last drive or an end-of-game scenario, both of which the Packers have found themselves in against the Falcons and Raiders with the ball, under 2 minutes left, needing to score from your own side of the field. But at the same time, those 2 situations you got burned in, Robinson against Campbell and Adams against Smith, those are valuable situations too. And those were big plays on drives that led to the other team taking a lead they never gave up. So I think the Packers have to either A, put in an easy check to get out of that. I don't think it's that easy. Or B, the easier solution is to call a timeout. Because guess what? Yes, it's valuable on the last drive, but maybe you don't even have to get to a last drive where you have to score a touchdown or a field goal. In some instances, I'm not talking about these two games in particular, but maybe you don't even get yourself in that predicament if you call a timeout and, get in a different personnel. They got to get out of that. It's one thing to be like, okay, it happens, but you can't let it happen repeatedly. And I understand it's the NFL, but it's killed the Packers twice now. They need to make a change.
Definitely. And yes, timeouts are valuable. No question. Absolutely. You only get 3 of them per half, and you can't take them with you after the end of the first half. Yeah, but so are 6 points. And when you've got a mismatch like that, and listen, I thought Jimmy Garoppolo, by and large, and I know Devontae was dealing with a bum shoulder, but I thought he forgot that Devontae was even on the team until the second half.
Rodgers called him out for that on McAfee.
Okay, there you go. I didn't have a chance to listen to that. So yeah, I didn't understand what Jimmy Garoppolo was doing, really, or Josh McDaniel.
Joe Barry effect.
Right, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, you got to figure that out. You've got to, like you said, either check out of it or call a timeout, because giving up 6 points, that's pretty valuable too in a close game. So
without a doubt. After this break, we got Wayne Larrivee, voice of the Packers, on the other side. See how his trip to Vegas went. I know Drew and KB mentioned it while I was on with them. I believe it was the last current NFL stadium Wayne had to check off his list of broadcasting
there you
from.
go.
So we'll talk to him about that.
Nice.
Always love our weekly chats with Wayne. That's coming up in a couple minutes right after the break. Stay with us right here on The Game.
I wouldn't have it any other way. If you're with me, let me hear you say, I like it like that. Hey, windows down, chilling with the radio on. I like it like that. Damn, sun's so hot. Make the girls take it all off. I like it like that. Yeah.
Matt Schneidman Show, Wednesday, October 11th, as we head into the bye week. And as we head into the bye week, let's remind you of our fantastic friends at Iron Jock. Who doesn't love a free cap? Oh, I'm coming off a cold.
You all right, dude?
I'm okay. I just choked. I'm normally able to hold in a cough or a sniffle, but as I just said to Doug, I'm battling some congestion because this is what happens when you have to walk through a dirty casino floor every day to get to your hotel room in Vegas. Anyway, who doesn't love a free cap? I do, because I'm wearing one right now. This one wasn't free. But when you order Iron Jock gear between now and October 15th, not only can you take 20% off your entire order, but Iron Jock will also throw in a free performance cap. Just enter promo code CAP20. You'll love it. Go to ironjock.com for details. That's ironjoc.com now through October 15th. Wayne Larrivee was supposed to be on the line. I think he's taking his afternoon nap. I did connect with him earlier today, and he said he was going to come on. But for now, we have a man who is on the show every week, my close friend Jake from Charleston, and we have to give him a silent round of applause because he came on the show last week and said his lock of the week was the Jacksonville Jaguars plus 5.5 against the Buffalo Bills in London, and you're an absolute coward for not taking them money line.
You were trying to convince me that I was wrong. You were saying, "Oh, Josh Allen, he's ready," all this other stuff.
No, I said I liked the rationale that the Jaguars were used to London, that they were staying there.
Well, you scared me off, and you were wrong about the Packers and the over. That was your lock of the week.
Yeah, it wasn't even close. I was wrong. You're right. Anyway, now this is your space because we normally get a Packers pick. Packers are on their bye week. You have earned the right to give a general NFL pick. I texted you a couple hours ago. I need you to come in hot with another winner for the people. What do we got for this week?
So I didn't want, since this is a Packers show, I really like the Lions. I'm not going to take them on the Packers show. I'm taking the ugliest pick of the week. I like the Houston Texans plus 1.5.
Against
the New Orleans Saints.
Okay, where is that game?
It's in Houston. Over under 42.5. If you're curious.
So Houston plus 1.5 at Houston against the Saints. I like that. CJ Stroud is probably the front runner right now for Offensive Rookie of the Year. He is set to break the curse of Ohio State quarterbacks. I like that pick. Houston Texans plus 1.5. And I also wanted to circle back on your Jordan Love over 22.5 touchdown passes. Let's see what we're at through 5 games. We're at 8. So that is on pace for over 22.5 still.
Yeah, him putting up a 0 this week, though, was a little alarming.
Yeah, not ideal for you. And Matt LaFleur, Coach of the Year, I think that one's done.
Yeah, I think that one's done, too.
I think that one's in the dust. What was for dinner tonight, as we have to ask, as always? And be careful, my mother is listening, and she doesn't want you to trash your wife's cooking anymore.
We had chicken parm, and it was very good. She made something good this week. She knew it was something that I like. She knew that she didn't want to get called out on the radio again. So she was looking for something good.
Excellent. Fantastic. Well, appreciate the call, as always. Get back to doing whatever you do on Wednesday nights. And Texans plus 1.5 for all the people who want to get rich. That's Jake's lock of the week.
Okay. Good luck. Good luck and good luck.
Is Wayne awake from his nap yet?
Not yet.
Jesus.
Sorry, man.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. Something else I wanted to mention, going off the discussion of, Preston Smith guarding Devontae Adams, Devondre Campbell guarding Bijan Robinson. Devondre Campbell is the guy they need to get back. They have 3 defensive starters battling injuries right now. Devondre Campbell with his ankle injury that's caused him to miss the last 2 games. Darnell Savage, who left early. It was strange on Monday night because he suffered the calf injury, I think at the end of the first half, and then he came back in, but then he left again and was on the sideline in street clothes. Quay Walker suffered a knee injury. He didn't return. So Walker and Campbell, their 2 starting inside linebackers, are injured, and that leaves Eric Wilson and Isaiah McDuffie. I wouldn't be surprised if they try out inside linebackers this week, maybe to add one to the practice squad for a game day elevation. And then Darnell Savage. So Packers got to get healthy. I know we've talked about ideally the bye week comes in the middle of the season. The Packers have been quote unquote screwed the last couple of years with it being really late or really early. It's coming at a decent time because with the placement of this bye week, they can not only get Campbell healthy, because remember, he wasn't placed on IR, so there's a chance he returns against Denver. And then Matt LaFleur said about Savage and Walker, they're hopeful to get them back against the Broncos. We'll see about them too. And then reinforcements at cornerback, Eric Stokes against the Broncos or against the Vikings. His 21-day window to either be activated to the 53 off the PUP list or shut down for the season was opened on October 3rd. So the Packers play the Broncos on October 22nd. So he can either be activated before that game or the week before they play the Vikings at home in week 8. So is Eric Stokes going to start or play a lot of snaps right away? No, but we've already seen a couple injuries at corner this year. Not a couple, mainly to, well, I guess a couple, Jair Alexander and Carrington Valentine. And Eric Stokes, if he can return to that rookie year form, will be a nice depth addition for that group.
Without a doubt. And he seems to have a good attitude about it, too. I mean, he was asked in the locker room, I think 2 weeks ago. It's like, hey, when you do come back, where do you fit in on this team's defense? It's like, man, just put me anywhere. I'm ready to contribute however I can contribute. And you don't always hear that from first-round picks. They've got a kind of a set place as to where they think their place is. But he knows that, listen, he has to get back to, like you said, that rookie form that he had and live up to some of the first round hype and stay healthy. And he'll, at least he says, he's willing to do whatever it takes and willing to play wherever Joe Barry wants to put him in the defensive configuration. So certainly they need some help back there. And like you said, there's been a couple of injuries, and when Jair Alexander is out, this team does struggle.
Correct. And I think on the topic of the defense, I found it funny, not funny, but ironic that when Mark Murphy, who, if you ever want to know what's really going on inside 1265 or ever know what people are thinking, just put a microphone in front of the guy. He'll tell you. Matt LaFleur, Brian Gutekunst will not. Mark Murphy stepped to the podium after the shareholders meeting in late July before training camp started. And among the things he said, I would say among the two things he said that Matt LaFleur or Gutekunst would never say, one of them was, we're probably going to get to see Matt's true offense.
Right.
And another was, the defense is probably going to have to carry us for the first half of the season. I don't think, listen, they played really well on Monday. They did enough to win that game.
Sure.
But has the defense given us any reason to believe that against teams that don't have horrific offenses like the Las Vegas Raiders, have they given us any reason to believe they can consistently string together performances that will be good enough to single-handedly win games? No. They've had 3 good performances: Bears, Saints, and Raiders, but interrupted by horrific showings against the run, against the Falcons and Lions. So what reason do we have to believe that Jair Alexander's wish or demand that they don't give up any touchdowns? We can't believe that's true, especially if they don't have 3 of their starters.
Right. And it gets down to, at some point of the season, we're not there yet. It's 2-3. They're at their bye week. But at some point, you have to start asking your question, what is 2023 all about? Is it about trying to get to the playoffs? Is it about trying to grow? Is it about taking a step back? Is it about patience? Mark Murphy, again, at the shareholders meeting, told the assembled, 6,000 or 8,000 or however many showed up at Lambeau Field, that, this is a team that, is very young, obviously the youngest in the NFL, and we're going to ask for some patience after, you had all this, Hall of Fame play the last couple of years. You had 2 Hall of Famers 2 years ago with Adams, arguably, and Rodgers certainly, and then last year with Rodgers, but he's playing on a broken thumb. They still didn't have a winning record last year. They were 8-9. But you're going to sometimes have to take a step back. I mean, I think the Packers are in better shape than some teams that historically have been very good. You look at the disaster that's going on right now with, 2 head coaches that have won Super Bowl rings, specifically the disaster that's going on in Denver, the Packers' next opponent, and what's going on in New England right now when Robert Kraft is not ruling out firing Bill Belichick. arguably the greatest coach in NFL history. So, I mean, you still have to have players. And when you don't have those players, coaches that were thought of as elite don't look so elite anymore.
Of course. Now, it'll be interesting to see if Matt LaFleur can turn it around. I don't think he's on the hot seat, despite what anyone says.
I can't
He's going to get
imagine.
time to make this work with Jordan Love. This is a 2-year trial run. And guess what? It's a 2-year trial run for Jordan Love. Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst. Let's say Jordan Love isn't the long-term guy. And Jordan Love gets 2 years with the Packers as the full-time starter. Even if they move on from him after next season, I don't think Matt LaFleur or Brian Gutekunst get fired.
I agree.
I don't think you get fired if you miss on one quarterback. You get fired if you miss on two. And even then, someone like John Lynch absolutely whiffed on Trey Lance. Horrific.
Mm-hmm.
But guess what? He's made up for it with Brock Purdy and building the rest of that team around him. I'm not saying the Packers are anywhere near the roster of the 49ers because they're not. But there are other ways to judge a general manager than just, is their handpicked quarterback any good? So I don't think either the head coach or GM are anywhere close to being on the hot seat.
I agree. And I know the Packers fans don't want to hear that. I mean, we get it literally every day. And I'm sure you get it probably as much as anybody, if not more. That, I mean, go to the talk and text line. Matt LaFleur should be fired. Okay, just take a step back. You look at the record that the Packers had through the first 3 years of his tenure as Packers coach, and they won 13 games 3 straight years. Yes, Aaron Rodgers was there for all 3 of those years. Devontae Adams was there. And then last year they took a step back. But again, I think that would have been an entirely different season if Aaron Rodgers hadn't broken his thumb. That's not to say that they would have been Super Bowl contenders last year because Rodgers really struggled in the early going with his young receivers because his best receiver, well, we saw him on Monday night playing in silver and black. And that was still a factor, I think, last year. But no, I mean, they traded up to get him and they didn't need a quarterback at the time. Then again, they didn't need a running back at the time and they chose A.J. Dillon in the second round. They didn't need an H-back in the third round because, let's face it, who does? And they wound up with Josiah DeGuara in the 2020 draft. So, I mean, they're not getting fired. It's just not going to happen. So I know Packers fans, again, don't want to hear that, but they're not getting fired.
And guess who else isn't getting fired during the season? Joseph Barry. It's just not going to happen. And I'm not just saying that because they beat the Raiders. The Raiders, according to our Vic Tafer, who was on the show on Friday, are one of 5 teams since 2010 to score fewer than 20 points in the first 5 games of a season. Raiders are bad. So the Packers defense did what they had to. They did what they had to against the Bears. They did what they had to against the Saints without Derek Carr for a portion of that game and without Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams. So they did what they had to. Now let's see them do it against the Broncos, a team who's playing well on offense, against the Rams and Matthew Stafford, against the Vikings, even sans Justin Jefferson. That's what will determine kind of the temperature around Joe Barry, even though I don't think he's getting fired either way. Was that Wayne waking up from his nap?
It was Wayne, and we just had this will shock, I think, everyone that listens to this radio station on any kind of long-term basis. We had some phone issues, and so we're going to take a quick break here, and then we'll come back and have a full segment with Wayne. How about that?
That sounds good to me. You heard the man, Doug Russell. Take a leak. Go for a walk.
Dude, hey, man, do whatever you got to do.
Do whatever you got to do. We'll be back in a couple minutes here on The Game talking to Wayne Larrivee. That was a bad transition.
Look at where I ended up. I'm all good already, so moved on. It's scary. I'm not where you left me at all. So if you don't wanna see me dancing with somebody. It's late in the evening.
Matt Schneidman Show, Wednesday, October 11th. Wayne Larrivee has awoken from his slumber, or whatever he was doing, and now we have him on the show. One of my favorite segments, Wednesdays with Wayne, this week, because Tuesday was kind of a tough day yesterday because I was flying back from Vegas. Wayne, what were your activities, your extracurricular activities in Vegas besides calling the game?
Well, I found a good local restaurant out in Summerlin, and that was an activity. Beyond that, no, because being a team employee, we can't go into, the casinos and
Right.
partake in that part of it. Of course, you being an independent, you can go in there. And I just want to know, did you win or lose?
Listen, I ask the questions on this show. You don't ask them to me.
I could take that as it didn't go so
No.
well.
You don't take that as anything. No comment is how we're taking that. Anyway, let me ask you this, because Matt LaFleur has pushed back against this narrative that Aaron Jones is a quick fix for this offense. Do some of these offensive issues go away by just adding one player back? I mean, the offense shouldn't be this bad without just one guy, but how much gets fixed with, granted, their best offensive playmaker back in the lineup, assuming he comes back against the Broncos?
I just look at what he did against the Bears. Okay, he really, when it was all said and done, he was the real difference in that game. I think 11 touches, 130 some yards, the big touchdown play. I mean, he was the difference, in my opinion. I think he makes a huge difference in that offense. And I don't mean to contradict Matt LaFleur, but to me, as from an observer from the outside looking in, that offense is a lot better when he's healthy and on the field and functioning. And I can understand why they maybe held him back a little bit longer. He didn't seem quite right against Detroit. Hey, give him the Raiders game off, get the bye week in, and then, maybe you have somebody you can go to and you won't be on a pitch count and you can get this guy back into your lineup, because I think they really, he's a guy that can make a play and make something out of nothing.
I read the stat at the top of the show that I found that in terms of offensive points per game scored in the first half, the Packers ranked 29th in the NFL with 5.2 points per offensive points per first half. I'm not even talking about, pick sixes and whatnot from other teams. In the second half, the Packers lead the NFL in offensive points scored per second half with 16, ahead of the Miami Dolphins. You've been around this game for a long time. How do you explain such a disparity like that?
I can't. And here's the other thing. Two things about that, man. That number one, the second part of that equation is amazing when you think that Miami put 70 points on the board in a game. And the other part I was wondering about is, okay, they're 29th. They've scored 5 first-half points or something like that. Or they're 29th. Who's worse? Who are the teams that are worse?
Yeah, there are some bad teams in this league. I'll find that while you finish answering the question.
No, I mean, hey, listen, that's the inconsistencies we see with this team. But here's the thing that I was thinking about is, well, today, it's funny how we've been talking about slow starts, and yet I remember when Matt LaFleur first got here, he and Aaron Rodgers, they always get off to a quick start. They'd almost always score, it seemed like, on the first series of the game. And so, it's different with this squad. I think they've kind of got to feel things out, and maybe it takes them a while to get things going and that type of thing. And maybe that's just the inexperience that we're seeing there. I don't know, but I don't have a real explanation for it.
So I'm looking right now at teams and their offensive points per first half. Give me 2 seconds here. Well, I'll find it later. But, I go back to what Mark Murphy said after the shareholders meeting and kind of playing off the offensive struggles. Mark Murphy said at the podium before training camp started, the defense was going to have to carry this team in the first half of the season, most likely. Now, we know Mark Murphy, he has some loose lips in front of a microphone. He tells it how it is. This defense has played well in 3 out of their 5 games, but not against impressive teams. The Bears, the Saints without their starting quarterback and 2 starting running backs, or I should say their top 2 running backs, and then a Raiders team who is one of 5 teams since 2010 to score less than 20 points in the first 5 games of a season. Against the two teams that are decent, the Falcons and Lions, the run defense collapsed. Does this defense give you any optimism that it can consistently will this team to wins while the offense finds its mojo, as Jair Alexander put it?
Well, I think they can. They'd have to be a little better in terms of takeaways, you know what I mean? Especially at crucial points in the game. You've got to get more turnovers, more defining turnovers. But, it's funny, even against the Lions, I just thought the Lions' offensive line was just outstanding in that ball game, and they kind of controlled it. But the Packers, defense, I mean, I thought they got some negative plays against the Lions. They had a lot of negative plays the other night in Las Vegas, and I think that the problem that we see is, okay, they'll get a couple of negative plays, and then something breaks loose, and a call or two later. So can they kind of well, let me put it this way. I don't know if you saw the game. I watched Pittsburgh when we were on the plane flying to Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
I watched Pittsburgh. If you want to know how a defense can carry out and win a football game, there they were. They're getting beat 10-3. It's like the fourth quarter, and that defense just would not relent. They took over. They beat a good Baltimore team, and they won the game. And so, I would say this. If you're a Packers fan and you want to know how the Packers you want to see the Packers play defense, great defense, watch the Pittsburgh Steelers and hope the Packers can play that way, because I'm telling you something, that's a great defense. And they can win games, and they can will wins. And their team, their offense is a little hit or miss these days, with the quarterback is just in his second year. So that defense is doing it. I think the Packers defense is capable of doing that, and I think they've shown flashes of being able to do that. Tackles behind the line of scrimmage, timely sacks. They got a couple of them in the game the other night. I think the one area they need to get a little bit better at is takeaways. And I know Rudy Ford's had a couple of interceptions in back-to-back games. They need, Jair Alexander, people like that, take the ball away and score it. That's what they need to do, and that's a tall order for any defense. And but I think the Packers certainly are capable of doing that. Have they done it so far? Not really, but they've kept the team in the game. In 3 of the 5 games, they've kept them right there. And really, they gave up 20 points to Atlanta. You should win that game.
Totally. Okay, so I found the stat. Offensive points scored per first half. Packers are tied for 29th with the Falcons with 5.2. The Cincinnati Bengals have 4.4, and the New York Giants have 2.4.
Wow.
And I mean, the last 3 games, if you want to look at just the last 3 games, the Packers are last with 2 because they've scored 0, 3, and 3. And I didn't take a math class at Syracuse, but that's 6. Divide that by 3 games. That's 2 points per first half over the last 3 games.
Yeah. That's an amazing stat. I mean, it's not like we're 2 weeks into the season. We're 5 weeks in, right? I mean, that's an amazing stat when you think about it. And that's something I'm sure that the coaches are burning midnight oil during this bye week to figure out how to get off to a better start. Because here's the other thing about defense too. Your defense can be better, usually better when you're on the lead. You know what I mean?
Of course,
it really can. And playing on the lead helps every defense, and because then you can start dictating to the opposite offense what you want to do. So that defense the Packers hasn't had an opportunity. They played on the lead in Atlanta for most of the ball game there.
And it didn't go well.
On the lead in Chicago, but but against New Orleans, they're 17 down in the fourth quarter. So. I think if the Packers offense can get off to a better start, control the football a little bit more. Look at time of possession, Matt. It was outrageous in that game against Detroit. It wasn't good against the Raiders the other night. The Packers were on the downside of time of possession. And people wonder, well, what does that mean? Well, it means the other team has the ball. Your defense is out there getting worn down. And by the way, they're running more plays than you are. And so, that's huge. And that makes a big difference. So this complementary football we talk about all the time has only happened on occasion for the Packers this year. And it happened a little bit in the Raiders game, but not enough. And that's what they need to do. And when the defense has been out there for a while, the offense has to get the ball back, possess the football, give the defense a break, and score it.
Yeah, I think the reason the stat's interesting is because of the disparity. Now, I understand that the reason they're scoring more in the second half, not even more than any other team in the league, is because they have to kind of be more aggressive. I talked about this with the guys on 9 to Noon this morning, and John brought it up. The Packers have to be more aggressive when they're in deficits. They throw the ball more. It's more likely they score. Sure. Teams are maybe playing softer with big leads, like the Lions. I didn't, dissect the tape that much, but like the Eagles last year when they had a big lead on the Packers, Jordan Love puts up a lot of points in the second half and a lot of good plays because the Eagles are playing soft, too high shell. And he's,
right.
They just don't want to get beat over the top. Speaking of Jordan Love, Aaron said this on McAfee this week, that the narrative around Jordan, and really any narrative, can change so drastically week to week. I came into this season saying we need about half a season to get a decent gauge on what this kid can be. I think he's going to get 2 years to prove that he can be the guy. If he played really well the first half of this season, he would get an extension by Thanksgiving. If he didn't, they'll ride it out and hope it improves. At what point, A, where are we now with Jordan Love? Do you still think it's too soon to make any sort of judgment on what he could be? And B, at what point is it okay to say, okay, I think this is what we have here?
I think it's too early to draw those conclusions. I know that's what a lot of people are doing. Writers, broadcasters, people looking to get clicks. Okay, let's do a hot take, and let's base it on what we've seen in the last 3 weeks from Jordan Love. And I think that would be premature, wildly premature. I know the organization isn't doing that, but at the same time, certainly this is going to have to get better. He's going to have to complete more passes, make bigger plays, that kind of thing. And I think that will happen. But it's hard because we knew with Aaron Rodgers halfway through his first season as a starter that he was the guy. But look at the receivers he was throwing to. I mean, Donald Driver, the all-time leading receiver for the Packers. Greg Jennings entering his prime. You had, I think, a young Jordy Nelson and James Jones. I mean, those guys are much more experienced than the Packers receivers now. These guys now might have equal talent, maybe. We'll see. But they're so inexperienced. It's really hard to get a read on this quarterback. And, Matt, what you said may be how the organization plays it. They may go 2 years with this guy before making a determination as to whether he's the guy or not.
I mean, I don't think they're in a position to take one of the top quarterbacks in this draft, whether it's obviously not going to be Caleb Williams, but Drake May from UNC, Shedeur Sanders from Colorado. Because I think this Packers team, has enough talent to trip into 6-7 wins at the very least, especially with the schedule they have. So I don't think this is going to be a year where they get one of those quarterbacks, which is yet another reason why I think they're going to stick with Jordan Love for next season, no matter how it goes this year, unless it's an unmitigated disaster. But that's why it'll always be interesting in Green Bay. That's one of the most intriguing storylines in sports. And after a hot start to the season, we've seen how just in less than a month, the tone on this kid can completely change.
Oh, absolutely. Well, look at the narrative in Chicago. Okay, let's just take a look at that. 3 weeks ago, we're talking about the biggest dumpster fire early in the season that anyone's ever seen. And 2 weeks later, I mean, hey, they had the Broncos beat. It wasn't his fault. He had a great first half. And then last week against a good defense at Washington, he tears them apart. And now everyone's saying, well, whoa, maybe they do have a quarterback. And you're right. What did it take? 2 weeks to go from dumpster fire. They're going to have to fire everybody to maybe they have a quarterback. And so, yeah, this league is a lot of ups and downs, and the climate changes quickly, Matty.
It certainly does. And we get a little bit of a break from the chaos. What are you doing on your bye week?
You know what? I'm taking some time off. I'm in the mountains in Park City, Utah.
Fantastic. Well, you enjoy that. We'll even give you maybe a week off from Matt Schneidman Show Tuesdays next week if Tim Scott allows us to. But
you don't have to do that. I would miss talking to you, and I'll be back at the office by then. So
okay.
I'll actually have something to say.
Fair enough.
I mean, gee.
Fair enough. Well, Wayne, you enjoy your time in the mountains. Thanks as always for joining us.
You bet, Matt. Take care. Have a good week.
You too. That was Wayne Larrivee, as always.
from Park City, Utah.
From Park City, Utah.
Very
Our
nice.
conversations with Wayne are sponsored by Coal Investment Group, the retirement specialists, and Pella Windows and Doors of Wisconsin. That about wraps it up for this edition of the Matt Schneidman Show here on Wednesday, October 11th. We don't have much new to talk about for the rest of the week in Packers land because there is no availability. But guess what? There's still going to be a show. We're still going to find stuff to talk about. And Doug is still going to play Jason Derulo as I close out the last
I'm not, because I'm
40 seconds of the...
I'm joining Wayne out west.
That's right. I forgot.
You get to deal with Hunter for the next
Hunter
4
Baumgart
nights.
will be on the ones and twos for the rest of the week. Even more of a reason to join us on the Matt Schneidman Show, even when there's no breaking Packers news. So thank you for joining us. As always, we appreciate everyone for listening here on the Matt Schneidman Show on The Game. We'll talk to you the same time tomorrow.
You'll see a side of love you never known. I can see it going down, going down. In my head, I see you all over me. My head, you feel my fantasy. My head, show me screaming no. In my head, it's going down. My head, it's going down. My head, yeah.